All right, our next presenter is Dr. Ellen Smith, who is the study chair of A221805, Duloxetine to prevent oxaliplatin-induced CIPN. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Gosh, I felt like I was walking down the aisle getting married. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about our ongoing trial. I see Cecilia back there. I'm really glad you're here because we're going to need you. For those of you who may not be familiar with this trial, it's a randomized controlled trial, placebo-controlled trial, and it has two phases. It's a phase 2 to phase 3. We're currently in the phase 2 component. In addition, there is an embedded correlative science aspect of this trial, and I'll talk about that as we get into it. So here's the schema. And so in the phase 2 component, which again is where we're at currently, the goal is to look for a most promising dose. So whether it be 30 milligrams of duloxetine a day or 60 compared to placebo, if we find that there's a promising dose, we'll move that dose forward to the phase 3. If we find that duloxetine doesn't work at all, then we will not move forward and the trial would be discontinued. So duloxetine is given as what I'm going to show you now. It started on day 1, cycle 1 of FOLFOX or KPOX regimens. And it started at half dose. And the reason for that is that there is some possibility that patients will experience some nausea when they first begin the drug. And we know that if they start at a lower dose, they'll be more likely to adjust to that. And then for weeks 2 through 16, they then are taking full dose for that period of time. Then in week 17, they taper off. So if they're on full dose, they go back to half dose and then they stop the drug. So as I mentioned, the primary objective for the phase 2 is to compare those two doses. And then, of course, we have a variety of other secondary and tertiary outcomes that we're looking at. For example, again, because there are multiple oxaliplatin-based regimens that we're using in this trial, we'll look to see if there are any differences. We're currently looking at toxicity on a very regular basis because that's very important. And then as far as tertiary aims, there's all kinds of other things that we can look at in an exploratory way. So we'll be looking at acute neuropathy, we'll be looking at chronic pain, et cetera, as we move forward. The embedded correlative science study is kind of an interesting one in that it has nothing to do with duloxetine. And it has to do with how do we encourage patients to select ePro instead of paper data submission methods, because we know that it's quicker, the data is better, we think, and we get the answers more quickly. It's less work for you all once a patient gets started. So we want to encourage this. And why we decided to do this is when we first designed the study, I was really excited about ePro. And I had led a prior CALGB study where we were using paper, and it took forever, to get the data back from sites and to clean the data. And I thought, yay, this is going to be great. But then I learned that only about 30 to 40% of patients, when given the choice, actually pick ePro. And so we thought, why don't we try to encourage that by doing some kind of educational intervention for patients to teach them about, what is a patient-reported outcome, why is it important, and what are the pros and cons of ePro versus paper. So we created this, this didn't format correctly. We created a 6-minute, very cool, funny video, as well as written materials. And the goal is to see if exposure to this educational intervention will increase the uptake of ePro. And the patient populations are those that started the study after we activated this amendment, which I think was back in the fall. July, I think, compared to people that started on the trial before EPRO, so the historic control group. So we're looking at uptake, we're looking at data quality, and then we have two qualitative initiatives going on. So first of all, although not part of this study, you all participated in Yumin Cho. Yumin, you want to stand up? She's in the back, where you guys did surveys and she interviewed you to learn more about this. So thank you for your support of that. And then within this trial, we're doing the same thing with patients, and Yumin is doing the interviews. So why do we think this ePro-E is important, and how does it maybe influence you and your lives? So again, it's a patient-targeted intervention, and hopefully it'll address hesitation that patients may have about using technology. It hopefully will help you. I know there's some startup that is probably time intensive, but after patients begin to use it, then you're not submitting any of their data. And so at the end of the day, it should help you. Again, we hope that this video will help patients be more confident in their abilities. And also, I do know that there are some issues, you all are very attentive to making certain that your patients collect their data, and now this is out of your hands. And so we'll talk a little bit about that next. What we're learning as we're looking at the data currently is that there's a lot of missing ePro data. So whether patients are not clicking the links or whatever. And so I want to encourage you all. So some of you had said, I have no way of knowing if my patient has submitted data, but there is a way to know, and that's by, I'll show you a screenshot in a minute where you can go into Rave and see. So how it works is that there's a two-step registration, and patients have to, you have to go through both of those steps. And for the historic control folks, you have to go back, reconsent them, and then complete that step 2 registration. Many of you I know tried to do that initially and it was broken and didn't work. So it should be fixed now. So I urge you to go back, reconsent if your patients are willing as historic controls, because we really need that population. And so Mary Scott, many of you know Mary Scott. She has been working with you and she can help you to deal with this. So thanks to you all, we have 105 out of 177 that are targeted for the phase 2 component. And we think we'll finish by the end of the year. And so here's the accrual graph to date and accrual by sites. So again, thank you to all of you. We have a couple of, very high accruing folks. I don't know if you're here or online, but a shout out to you all. And if you have any suggestions for how to help people accrue, it would be great to talk about that. So the eligibility criteria, so it was recently amended. There was an update 3 that went through in March to open eligibility to patients who are receiving not only 3-month Kpox and FOLFOX regimens, but also 6-month FOLFOX. And again, there's a lot of controversy about that we don't have time to get into, but we think by opening up this eligibility that accrual will pick up. And then eligibility for the sub-study, they have to be obviously eligible and enrolled in the parent study. They have to have a smartphone or tablet and access to Wi-Fi. So here's the eligibility based on FOLFOX regimen. Again, 3-month Kpox, 3-month FOLFOX, or 6-month FOLFOX. And as far as the sub-study, so again, your patient has to have a smartphone and a tablet and access. And if they have those things, so meaning they're eligible for the sub-study, they have to participate in both the parent and the sub-study. And the reason for that is that if we let patients opt out of the sub-study, then we have a significant sampling bias, because the people who will opt out are the people who are not likely to want to use electronic methods. So we want to make certain that we're accruing all kinds of people who are into electronics and who are not. And then, once they complete this educational intervention that they're getting via email, so it's really important that you get their email and you get their correct email. They then get this intervention via their email. They get some surveys via their email. And then they come to you and they say, I want to do booklets or I want to do ePro. If a patient does not have a device, then they're not eligible for the sub-study, but they can participate in the parent study. So what you'll notice in the update 3 protocol are some minor changes to when data are collected. So what this illustrates, that top box shows the study calendar pieces of the initial protocol as far as when to collect pieces of data. And then the bottom boxes show the changes. So basically, I don't know if there's a pointer on this guy or not, or I can use a pointer here. Hold on. Let's see if I can figure it out. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to.
They can see your mouse though.
They can?
Mhm.
Okay. So the main change is that the addition of the 12 cycle or 6-month FOLFOX time point has been included again for all the day 1 measures and all the day 2 through 6 measures. The main difference is here, where we used to be collecting measures 1 month after the last oxaliplatin, but because some people are having that last one after 6 cycles and some are having that last one after 12, we had to modify that. So now there are surveys that are due 2 weeks after when cycle, so this is confusing, I have to be concise about this and accurate. So 2 weeks after the day 1 cycle 4 Kpox or the day 1 cycle 6 or 12 FOLFOX. So the next bunch of slides, and I hope you'll have access to these once you get back to your sites, show some of the differences in what ePro, what the app will look like. And again, this is what Cecilia is very expert in. And what I want to say before I forget is that Cecilia is here and she has agreed to meet with anybody to do any sort of one-on-one teaching, help, problem solving. So you want to stand up so everybody knows who you are? So will you like maybe hover in the back of the room maybe when things are all done? Great. So I don't think I want to get into a lot of detail here, but just to show you that there are some changes in the way the ePro app looks now post the amendment. And so what you see here is what it used to look like on the left, and now what it looks like here, and what's circled here is what the change is. And so another change again is that because now we have sort of 3 different oxaliplatin-based regimens, it's important that everybody collect this or the patients tap that first one that's circled in blue, which is again a little bit different than the prior. So you'll want to take this and look at this, I think, and study this on your own, but just to highlight that there are some differences. So if your patients, come to you who are already on the study. So actually that's a question. So Cecilia, if they were registered prior to update 3, does the app look changed or is it, so it's changed? Okay. So I don't think I want to go through all of these detail, but please look at this so that you can help your patients understand what it is they should be clicking depending upon whether they're a 3-month person or a 6-month person. And so I'm going to skip through that. So this next piece is what I think will help you to maybe know how to check, if you don't know already, about whether or not your patients are actually clicking on the links and submitting their survey. So you can go into RAVE. I'm not a RAVE expert, so if you have questions, Cecilia's going to help me. But you can go in to RAVE and you can see if the patients have actually completed their surveys. So I'd like to ask you to make certain that you check with your patients, check rave. If they missed a time point, then, we can't do anything about that. But if you see that they've missed one, make certain that you connect with them and, help them and say, I see you didn't do this one thing. Are you having trouble? Make sure you do it X, Y, Z. So that would be really helpful. And again, this is an important outcome, right, of this study. If we find that patients, aren't filling it out because they're not doing the app, then that's important to know. And again, that's why this ePro-E study is kind of a cool one. So ongoing recruitment efforts. Mary Scott, many of you know Mary Scott. She's our nurse manager, nurse extraordinaire. I think she's helped a lot of you. And because we have NIH R01 funding, I can pay her to pay attention just to you and just this study. And so I think she's been super helpful. And so she and I joke around about how many times I've presented this study to how many groups, and I think it's about 1 million. But as you can see, lots of conversation to get this out for folks to understand. We have regular webinars. We'll have another one after the Alliance meeting. And so there may be questions that come up after this, and we'll have that so that you have access to us to get your questions answered. The other thing that we're doing is we're working with the communications folks of the Alliance to really take advantage of social media. So we're going to be creating some pithy, fun sort of tweet kinds of things that are targeting 3 populations. So they target you, they target patients, and they target clinicians. And the message varies depending on the population. And one of the messages that we learned would be important from our advocates is that there's a main challenge that better than anyone, and that is the timing of this thing, right? So, patients have to start their study drug day 1, cycle 1. So that means you have to know in advance if they're going to go on study, you have to get their study drug, you have to deal with the ePro stuff. And some sites don't have a good system for that because the patients aren't coming in really very much between when they get their first treatment decision and then when they start. And so one of the messages from the advocates was just that, you have to think ahead to try to find these people and get them started. So we're going to be highlighting this, I think, in a newsletter. We haven't actually decided about that yet. And also be targeting professional organizations that have access to patients. But the advocates emphasize to us that it's not enough for us to reach out to the patients. We have to obviously take advantage of our professional colleagues, you and our treating providers to help with this. So I'll end with that. Here's my contact and Mary's contact information. We're both, I think, pretty accessible and would love to do whatever we can to help you to help us get the study done. So questions, do we have time for questions?
Just a quick question about the ePro part. Was it deliberate that you do not include completing ePro on laptops?
Yeah, it has to do, and maybe Cecilia can help me with that. It has to do with the platform, right?
Yeah, that's a metadata rave. Sorry. Metadata rave currently doesn't allow the app to be completed on anything other than an iPhone or an Android device. So that's actually like outside of our control, unfortunately, right now.
Are any of our super duper accruers here or online? Anybody have some great tips to help?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm from WashU. I was curious. So one part about doing questionnaires in paper with the patient in the clinician's office. One benefit is that, we're sometimes able to catch things that might not have been discussed during the visit, such as, depression or pain. I've personally caught things before that might not have been discussed. Is there any kind of safety alert feature since the patients are doing these on their phone, they're self-reporting, it's going in the internet database that might not being reviewed until later? Is there any kind of safety feature that might have a push notification? Are there any kind of triggers or anything like that that might email the physician or site team to let them know that the patient might be having issues?
Great for that. So let me make certain that I heard you. I think the main question is, because we're using an electronic app, is there a way that that app can send messages to providers about any adverse events that patients may be experiencing? The answer is no, because it's really just a data collection app. So that's it. That's the answer. Nothing online. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm so appreciative of you all. Again, thank you. And accrual is picking up and you guys are key. And so thank you for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.